All right, so today we're going to be talking about Grievous Gash and how it could replace perhaps Grievous Wounds. So let's get to it. The system, in my opinion, is one of the worst designed in the game. It's okay for what it is. Healing Grievous Wound is in a pretty good place right now. I don't know why there's so many suggestions to change it. So overall, the community is a bit all over the place. But 3 weeks prior to this video going live, we've got N-Step's perspective on Grievous Wounds.
Obviously, none of this is to say that I think the current Grievous Wound system is good. I don't, right? Like, if I haven't made that clear before, if you haven't listened to any of my things I've talked about, it's like, I do not think the current Grievous Wound system is good. And I think it would be great if we could redo it in a way that would work better.
All right, so the Grievous Wound systems as it is makes drain tanks and healers more compelling. It enables larger amounts of healings per instance, adds game variance via power disparity such as timing and item purchases, keeps global heals and checks, prevents the existence of a tank being the downfall of your team. So this is the Thornmail example where if you were in an ADC with 100% lifesteal, what you could do is just auto attack the tank, heal for 1000 HP every time you need to, and then just keep autoing the enemy team. So it's to prevent the existence of the tank being the downfall. Most of all, it's to significantly impede Fed drain tanks to take over the game. Damage needs to outpace durability as a core game-ending mechanic in League of Legends. Insert here whatever you think I've missed. So the current system is balanced for healers outnumbering Grievous Wound instances. But what are the weaknesses of such a system? The cost.
I think, biggest complaints about the current Grievous Wound system is how powerful it can be very early on in the game as a singular counter, very, very, very early to certain champions that just rely upon healing, and the way that that forces us to tune those champions away from their healing as their output and away from the healing as like a core part of their laning pattern. And so that is a high price for us to pay, but we pay it because Grievous Wounds kind of functions the way that it does. To me, that's actually more an argument that like Grievous Wounds could scale with character level or something like that.
So here, N-Step came up with a genius answer to solve the problem, but it is too strong. If you just look at the example, 8% heal and shield power is worth 400 gold as per the LoL wiki, whereas you can get 40% heal for 300 gold. It is too strong early. There is an issue, but that's the current system. Now let's get August's opinion.
So my personal opinion is Chempunk Chainsword is too weak. Like the fact that a fighter would go Executioner's Calling and then choose to build Mortal Reminder over Chempunk, to me means either A, Chempunk shouldn't exist at all. You should say go away, don't be here, or it probably needs some help. So I personally think it's undertuned. That said, it is deliberately undertuned. It's deliberate that Chempunk is on the weak side. Many of the anti-heal items, the way they're tuned is to be like, you can buy the anti-heal if you need it, and then completing it, like you're still missing out on something. So it's not about the completed item, it's about, here's a way to get anti-heal, and you give up a little to have it.
Alright, so results in some variants seeing no play. Chempunk Chainsword, the old one. The only good variant being poached by other classes, Mortal Reminder. Tuned to miss out on something, this is very important, because the bad stats mean that you effectively only counter 1 of 5 enemy players correctly, or equally. Purchases feel like a chore rather than a choice. First unique item you purchase at 4.5, and it's also the last one you upgrade, and some roles like jungle just completely avoid that role. It's an extremely dull combination, so rotten cherry on top of an otherwise pristine sundae. It's in top lane a premium to fit Grievous Wounds in your build, and it's punishingly difficult to do so. There's unclear messaging to the potency of the system via scripts in your item slots. Unreliable damage, which is conditional damage that only applies to healing, which is situationally worth purchasing when the enemy drain tank is popping off, which alienates the entire class of assassins who want reliable damage. Alright, so here's the core idea behind my pitch. Are healing and damage two sides of the same coin? So let's explore how counters work in the damage system. Counters to damage are armor, magic resistance, and effective HP for physical, magical, and true damage. They interact with damage calculations by effectively healing you. They're asymptotic by design. They reward players for stacking the counter, so more armor, more magic resist does better. Counter damage stacking comps, so if you're playing versus 5 ADs, you go ninja tabbies on every single roll. Champions have flat amounts and gain some upon leveling. Dictates optimal gameplay loop. So lane assignments, the mage should match the opposing armor stacker because he's not mitigating any of your magic damage. Is Grievous Wounds the antithesis of armor and MR? Well, it interacts with effective heal and grants damage as a result. Cool. It's asymptotic by design. It rewards players for stacking the counter. And this was my main gripe with this system. I was playing in the low elo iron games with my friends, trying to get them into the community. And they were all buying Grievous Wound items by just following shop recommendations. What would happen is that, as we've seen in the previous slide, they're missing out on something every time they do so. So here we have 4 teammates all buying the Grievous Wounds items and not actually countering the thing that they're trying to counter, which is the enemy healing drain tank. So I thought that was an issue that needed to be resolved. And it comes down to the fact that you actually need to coordinate damage in low elo. So instead of funneling 5 1v1s into the opposing drain tank, you actually need to coordinate and make it a 5v1, and then you have sufficient damage to counter that drain tank. Champions have flat amount 0 and gained upon leveling, so we have Katarina R at 6. Kled actually no longer grants as per the previous rework. Varus E still does it, and Singed RQ. Here I might have missed another example. August recently mentioned that Fizz W used to grant Grievous Wounds as well. And this system also dictates the optimal gameplay loops, so the split pushing drain tank should be countered by Grievous Wounds, grouping with teammates to maximize the amount of damage, because that's what Grievous Wounds is, it's just damage to healers. Now, probably my most compelling argument that the systems are very similar is this slide. So you can get this off a LOL wiki. It just shows you how healing, Spirit Visage, and Revise just work in the game and what do they apply. But if you look at Lifesteal, Omnivamp, Physical Vamp, Spell Vank, and this is Drain effects, these are all calculated post-mitigated damage. So if you just add a column and consider how does Armor, MR, Exhaust work in this system, they actually counter all these forms of healing by reducing the pre-mitigated damage to a post-mitigated damage. So they actually, Armor and MR actually does counter a healing, similar to Grievous Wounds in the scene. What Grievous Wound adds is self-heals and incoming heals to a lesser extent. And this I'll get to later on in the presentation why I say that. But this is probably the core reason why I think that they are the same. They should be treated the same. And we should be able to remove the salt of item purchases and all these complaints because the Armor and MR system doesn't have these. So what gives? So I think we need to change the ideology. We embrace the fact that healing should be treated similarly to other effective HP counters, such as MR and Armor, but be unique. So healers should always expect to face Grievous Wounds, in my opinion.
We changed Grievous to 60%. What happened is we created a meta where in every game, if you were a healer, you would experience Grievous Wounds. Grievous Wounds wasn't this thing that would just, sometimes they would have it. It was if you were a healer, they were guaranteed to have it, and they probably wouldn't be any weaker for having had it. Which again, the end result of Soraka heals more, Mundo heals more, is not that Grievous Wounds are a counter to healing, but instead, Grievous Wounds ended up as something that you were required to buy every game, and if you did not, you would instantly lose to anybody who could heal.
Alright, so what I'm proposing here, the graph beside, you can see the old system went to 40 to 60. It's like a staircase graph. And the current system is 0 to 40 as soon as 4 to 6 minutes, right? We've seen how cheap it is to get into anti-heal. The proposed system that I'm putting forward is the one that goes from like 0 all the way up to 70. So it's quite a bit stronger and can get there. But the way we balance that is to still aim for the 40% being the viable target. And we change the ease of application. So in the past, it was as soon as you deal 1 damage, you're already at maximum. And what I'm talking about is playing with how it ramps. Depending like on who showed up to your team fight. If there's a Grievous Wounds item purchaser in the current system that doesn't show up to the fight, you're actually at 0 the entire fight. And if he's there, it's an extra 40%. So in a system where you put multiple purchasers of Grievous Wounds on the enemy team or the ally team, what happens is you'll get varying instances or additions of Grievous Wounds so that you can have more game variance. So that's how I'm trying to tackle that. Grievous Wounds should be weaker in the early laning phase, that we already got end steps approval, that it is improvement. 2 Grievous Wounds items need to be purchased for this system to probably counter to hit 40. Thus, items must be fund purchases, and they are for Armor and MR, so there shouldn't be an issue to do that. Actually, also, Grievous Wounds is the equivalent of healing penetration. And penetration as a stat is sought out in so many classes, so many instances, as like the most broken and compelling stat there is. So there's absolutely no reason why this shouldn't be a stellar purchase. Signaling should be improved to showcase the busted nature of healing penetration. So here on the right hand side, what we have is a Soraka casting heal when Grievous Wounds is applied to her. So I've got 3 frames stacked on top of one another so that you can see the health bar move up. So first, the initial amount, presses heal, gets X plus a Y amount, which is actually the 40% that Grievous Wounds detected, to show up in yellow. So you see it for a frame or two as an enemy player having dealt that amount of damage, because then you go and you see the 3rd frame where it's a lower amount. So that's the total amount of healing, and you can see the mitigated. This kind of system can be applied to Black Cleaver and Bloodletter's Curse, which for me is just like other magic and armor pen systems. So it just makes sense that this behaves and again showcases how they should be treated similarly. Now, in a game that I recently played, this was in an Emerald 1 Elo, I was the MF, and I played versus a Jax, a Zac, a Galio, an Ezreal, and a Soraka. And I ended up going Lord Dominik's Regard and Chempunk Chainsword. And if you look, 20% of the damage that I dealt that game, and I carried that game, we were hard losing that entire game, and I came up and I did insane things. 20% of that damage came from Chempunk Chainsword's passive, 9200, and Lord Dom's passive, which was actually like the best in class, 7k damage. So Chempunk Chainsword would have applied about like 13% of the damage that I dealt that game. I could have seen in that form of a yellow bar just being tacked on to the Zac or to the Galio coming in or whatever, the Soraka healing. So it would have been insane to see that value. Instead, I had to refer to a script to see, okay, how's it doing versus Giant Slayer, and then somewhat understand how strong and how compelling this anti-healing actually was. And that can just all be avoided for lower elo who don't look at scripts, or if they do, they don't know how to correctly interpret them. So changing this is almost a mandatory. It needs to be more readily straightforward to understand the strength of this system. Stacking multiple instances should increase the potency of the counters. So this is where I said with the shopkeeper. So what does this new system look like? So if we look at the current armor counter, you have a flat amount and a percent amount that can be achieved via stacks on Black Cleaver and a flat amount on LDR. And what I'm proposing is you take those two systems, you merge them as one in the anti-heal space. So you create a Gash Stack, which is the Black Cleaver aspects of Gash1 and Gash2, which can contribute up to 10% per player. And you limit the Gash Stacks on enemy champions to be 10 because there's 5 players who can apply 2 stacks in a theoretical maximum. So that would make it so that there's a maximum of 10. And you lower Grievous Wounds to 20%. So now in a 1v1, provided that they opt into the system, they could get either 5, 10, or 30, or 25. Riot can decide how to balance this, and there's different ways you can go about it. There's a lot of fun that to be had. But you can actually control the graph of what it looks like. So you can make it early that if 20 is too strong, then you lower it to 5 or 10. And if 10's way too weak and 20 is way too weak, you can go up to 25 and 30. You can play with that without having to take the risk of changing the current system and the heals in the game, because we're already agreeing that it's too strong early, and you can make it just 30 to start, and then it can go higher. Now, some things will need to be changed, like Ignite currently applies Grievous Wounds, so you could have to change it to 20% plus 5 plus 10, depending on the Gash Stacks if we want. Now, I asked the question if Zedult should also apply Grievous Wounds to its target. And I didn't get much traction in the Discord community, but I ended up asking Riot August on stream, which I don't have a clip of because he didn't publish that video, and I was on my cell phone at the time. But he came out and said, actually, I agree that it would be cool for Zedult to apply Grievous Wounds. I think that'd be good for the game. And the reason it exists on Ignite is to make that summoner spell less sharp. So it's a way to add damage to that spell without making it, and a way of securing the kill without making the spell sharper than it is, because then everybody would just take Ignite. So that's why that exists. But what about Grievous Wounds cleansing?
Like, the way that I look at it, I say, I don't love Grievous Wounds cleansing. I don't think that it's particularly good for the game, because it kind of breaks a systemic piece of counterplay that is supposed to function. I also really dislike arms race type mechanics, where it's like, oh, I have the counter. Well, I have the counter to your counter, and then I have the counter to your counter to your counters. Like, I just think that makes the game worse. So I don't love counters to counters, which is what Soraka removing Grievous Wounds is. I don't have a great solution for you here. It's like, I don't think removing Grievous Wounds is a great solution. I also don't think that it being reduced by Grievous Wounds is great either. And that kind of wraps around to the first thing I said, which was like, I don't think the Grievous Wounds system is in a great place.
All right, now I'm gonna be maybe I'm gonna take a leap of faith here, but I'm gonna disagree with what NSEP just said about Soraka being an arms race, that it's a counter to a counter to counter to apply Grievous Wounds. So if we look back at the game that we played, and I just went and selected damage taken and healed, and you can see the MF. We basically healing regen is about 6k, 6,700. Nautilus is at 63. That's the amount you can expect. Galileo and Ezreal are at 5 and 6k respectively. But if you look at the healing that was done by the Drain tanks on our team, who wasn't popping off, who had a horrible game, was 65k. The Zac, who did pop off on the enemy team, is at 115k. And the Soraka, who popped off, who did very, very well, is at 43k. All right. So the amount of healing that she could actually accomplish is actually quite low compared to the actual Drain tank who will need that play pattern to play out. And if you take the time to look at how you beat Soraka in lane, the correct counter, and Discord was very adamant about this. Like, the whole community really backed this idea. The way you kill Soraka or you counter Soraka in lane is by building more damage and focusing her down. If she's dead, she cannot heal. Her healing is down to 0. Drain tanks, though, have this play pattern where they're supposed to out-heal damage instances, and it's all about trying to ramp up damage to be able to outpace the ramping healing, and that's that profile. Soraka doesn't fit that world. She doesn't have that profile. The way you counter her, it's not an arms race to build Grievous Wounds. You're actually better off just building more damage and securing the kill on her, and that's the true counter to enchanters like Soraka, Emilio, Janna. So in that world, what I'm getting to say is that, is Grievous Wounds currently just doing too much? It's a jack of all trades and master of none. And I really believe this, and I think that this system is a better way to look at it. You make burst healing treated by Grievous Wounds slightly, but it's the ramping Gash Stacks that really counter the Drain tanks and the compelling, and that's the system that does that. The enchanters, you just build more damage and focus her. The Janna ulting should just be one shot because she's literally not moving, just healing everybody around her, and she's got a 2k health pool compared to 7k on the enemy Drain tank. So for me, I think that this is a perception problem that needs to be addressed to understand what the core issues are with the system. Houston, it's asymptotic. So if we look, the current system I'm putting forward is 2010. It could go all the way to 70. But with some math, if you multiply the Grievous Wounds to the total Gash Stacks, you can get it down to 60. And you can get it down to 52% by just multiplying every single instance of Gash Stacks. But if you think about it, the consequences of this new system is early game can be stronger, dealer's choice 10 to 15%. Late game healing is very conditionally weaker, but more likely same as current. And I'll get to examples of that. Gash Stack coordination is pro play skewed only, not even challenger viable. Again, examples to come. Global healing is stronger. Soraka and Janna are, as a global max Grievous Wounds, is now 150%, down from 200%. One Drain tank versus 5 players now weaker in the sideline when multiple people opt into the counter. Dampening gameplay pattern emerges as a consequence. So this idea that dampening, what it is you're supposed to walk away once you have a debuff on you and come back into the fight once they've expired. So that kind of play style is more relevant now in this system. In the 1v1, the Drain tank healing is now stronger. Levers exist to adjust if this is problematic, but right now, that's what I'm aiming for. In a 5v5 Chaos Reigns, the Drain tank should be 40% in the vast majority of cases, which is the same as current. 2 Grievous Wound legendary items are built versus rather 2 components. Creates item pressure and game variance, which is great. Drain tanks engagers like Tom Kench will more reliably be punished for engaging a 5-man 1v5 without their team following up. So this is just a low elo coordination problem that just exists. You need to learn when you can go in as Lucian and when to play ahead and or behind. In most cases, healing is objectively stronger throughout the game by 5%, depending on right balancing. Maintains the path for damage, outpacing durability as the main win condition for League of Legends. Which of the above play patterns is unhealthy for the game? Just vote. Again, come to the Discord and chat and let's get this system improved. So it didn't take me that long to search for examples of a Drain tank popping off in low elo. I just searched it in the first video, showcased the first game, showed it. So here you see he just killed. Oh, right. We've got. Okay, Ash is dead. Katarina is not in. The Katarina goes in. Katarina is dead. All right, now it's a 2v1. Low healing. Oh, he healed.
Oh man, he held that shit.
So here in my system, Vladimir would be dead. Oh, but he was able to do the 1v1. And then just for satisfaction. So you see, and then he pops off and he kills all 4. So in a higher elo game, they would have come in together, all 4. They would have been able to kill the person. MF should not have started with her ult. She needed to burst down with auto Q auto and then to R following it. Keep it after he's used his pool. There's different ways that you can improve this, but essentially, the way this Gash stacks are meant to work is as you walk in, the first player applies 2 stacks, the second player applies 2 stacks, the third player applies 2 stacks. Every stack is refreshing the previous stack that was put in, and now the next person coming in, taking the next 1v1, is actually playing with the stacks of the previous deceased players. So you get to have an improved chance of winning versus Drain Tanks. And that's where the dampening comes in. He has to exit the fight, lose the 6 or 8 stacks of Gash, and then he can come back in with 0 and clean the extra 2 lying around. So that's what the purpose of the system is, but that's an example. So how do you Gash Stack? You limit to 1 Grievous item per champion. Like I said, maximum of 10 champions at a set amount of 0. And items interact with Grievous Wounds and Gash Stacks. And how do Gash stacks behave? So I'm trying for a new, different, and intuitive and simple solution. So these stacks are meant to behave similarly to Blitter's Curse and Black Cleaver without being identical. All Gash stacks are refreshed every time a player applies a new Gash stack on an enemy target. So that's to address the low elo 1v1 times 5, instead becoming a 5v1 is the correct way to look at it. But in this low elo example, like I said, is when they're coming in 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. The 5th player taking that 1v1 actually has 70% less healing applied to that target. So in a team fight, Gash stacks follow an unfamiliar logic. This is new. That of last applied first out or leapfrog on damage dealt trigger. So here's a Singed clip to show you what I'm trying to talk. So these are the totems, enemy totems that are placed. And what we're going to see is by pressing RQ, Singed goes 1, 2. Okay, so this is 0 now. This is at 2. But as soon as he hits this target, on the frame that it calculates damage, this will be at 1 and this will be at 1. And on the next calculation of damage, since the last applied and the nearest to the target is here, he would get 2 and then he would get 0. So the stacks are leapfrogging here, and you can't focus your stacks on the first person until they expire. No. As soon as you deal damage, you remove your oldest stack and you apply it to the nearest target that you've dealt damage to. So here it comes up, it's still 2 to this one, and then he's coming 1, 1, 2, 0, 1, 1, 2, 0, 1, 1, 2, 0 after that. And that's just how that works. So it's like a leapfrog. So you can't really coordinate where your stacks are going to go. In a team fight that just plays out, you're going to be focusing, you're going to be focusing the players that are nearest to you. So the ADC needs to survive. He's going to need to peel away from whoever's targeting him. He's running away. He can't afford to apply his stacks to the Mundo who's further out. He needs to take care of whatever's happening and then join the slot. So in a 5v5, there's so much chaos that you can't really control where your stacks are going to be applied, especially in this manner that it's literally targeted skills. They need to apply for AoE to the closest target. So here we have this Zyra example just to show what this looks like. So right now, as soon as she casted ult, everybody's targeting this plant. So this was 2-0 at the start. Then the ult popped and is popping up. So the closest instance of damage is now to this one. But it's only 1 instance of damage. So it would be 1-1. Then on the next damage calculation, so if it would be here 2-0. And then as soon as the 3 seconds expire, this guy would be getting 2-0 even though this is nearby. But the way it works is just the nearest damage to you that you've dealt out gets the stacks. And that's the priority for that. And let me just go next slide. So Grievous Wounds is balanced at 40%. The system automatically applies the stacks. Low complexity is nearly impossible to coordinate in 5v5 instances. No coordination burden. 40% remains the target balance. So low risk because it's the same as the current system, just different. Let's look at some challenger examples to be able to see like how the system would be effective if implemented. So here in this example, nobody's got it. Nobody's got Grievous Wounds.
Oh no, don't deal damage to me. It would be a shame. So silly. I'm fine, brother.
So nothing changes. We just got 2 drain tanks looking and just losing health and whatever. Now here's an example of a drain tank getting caught. So here we've got 3 players. Grievous Wounds is applied because we've got Singed and Aatrox having it. So he had to flash. He had to burn his flash. Okay. And now we go in. Even though the Mundo has Grievous Wounds, you know what? He's not in a case where it is a problem. He's not being focused. There's not the 3 players required to kill the Mundo to be able to focus the damage. So even though everybody had Grievous Wounds, in reality, the only one that matters was on Mundo, and they couldn't coordinate that damage to put the stacks on the Mundo. So it doesn't change anything, and you're still aiming. He would just have 30% rather than the current 40 in the current system. Now here's another example, and here I kept the commentary because, oh, is it great.
I'll be over.
All right, so now we'll look at it again without the voiceover. Good job. And what I want to look at is the Aatrox. And if you just play out through, Ahri's the only character on the ally team who has Grievous Wounds. The Aatrox is the enemy drain tank, and he dies without having Grievous Wounds ever applied to him because he took a fight where they could coordinate 3v1 the damage. And having Grievous Wounds just makes that easier to do, but it's the correct counter is just more damage, and Grievous Wounds is just a tool to make it so that you can hit that amount, that threshold readily. It's all that is. So it wouldn't change this amount. In Challenger Elo, your drain tank can die if mispositioned and not opting into the correct fights. And last example for that Challenger game, it's just the end.
I'm unkillable. Uh-oh. 5-man ult! 5-man ult!
So good job, Nat. If you look at the health, he had 7,400 health compared to 54 currently. So he got an extra 2k health. And if you look back at the graph that we used, that 2k health that he got is under the form of bonus health, which isn't countered by Grievous Wounds, Exhaust, or any system. So Riot has the tools to be able to circumvent, to build characters to opt in a certain way or whatever for it to be balanced or viable or fun. They have the tools to be able to do it via bonus health. Is the hand passive is how it's worked, so that it's not considered a heal and can't be reduced. So it can be controlled. It can be mitigated. Next. So thought experiments. What comp could reliably apply 5 stacks? So Mundo intentionally attacks a Taric with Thornmail. Why would you? Every teammate stacked the respective Gash Stacks on the same target. So did the tank just walk up without his team, which is like what Aatrox did there. Abilities were all targeted damage. So really? How long did the game even go for 5 players to finish Grievous Wound items? Everyone grouped for the team fight, no cross-mapping happening? Like, what troll comps were they facing to justify this amount of stacking? Now, if they were playing versus 5 drain tanks, and you could put one in every role because it's such a popular role in fantasy, that now you could actually stack it, whereas in current, it doesn't really matter. Levers for balancing. So Riot has years of experience balancing armor and magic resist. They can refer to 12.10 experiment of Grievous Wounds at 60% as the case study. And when stuck, they can just ask, how does armor and MR do it, and come up with a solution. So I strongly believe that they can handle this kind of project. All right, so now the fun part where NSTEP can come in and really shed some light. So first of all, we have a Gash component that comes in, and it deals 5 adaptive force. I put it at 350, could have been 400, because right now it's just a better longsword. And you add it to every component. So like Thorn Mail, you tweak a little bit so that it's part of that recipe. But it adds 5% anti-heal as a component. Now, this is probably one of the most important items that I want to create. So it's the Kempung Chainsword rework. So at 3K, I think is absolutely broken, but I miss the old Anathemas chains that was in the game. So I'm adding that vow, the nemesis, and as to the Kempung Chainsword. And what it does is now you have a targeted way as a top laner to just click on your enemy top laner, and now that's your nemesis for the rest of the game. You don't have to worry about your Gash stacks for the rest of the game. They'll automatically be applied to that person as soon as there's 700 units within you. What that does is it's supposed to address the gripe that a Discord user put forth, that Grievous Wounds was okay when it stimulated fights, but it was annoying when it was outside of combat healing that would just come, or healing on the wave. So at least this way what happens is you can walk up, and as long as you're in an aura with them, you can mitigate that healing that they're getting, and you can force trades. And I wanted to double down on that and create the unique siphon. And what it does is that the mitigated healing that you are essentially dealing via your Gash stacks actually heal you for that same amount. So now it's like a siphon. You're siphoning the healing that they're doing. You're siphoning a part of it onto you. So it makes it more interesting. So if they just want to like heal, well, at least they're healing you too. So to push you out of lane and out sustain shouldn't be as readily easily. And then whenever you're in a fight, you don't have to worry. Like your stacks are automatically being applied to your nemesis, not to whoever's nearest or whatever. So this is another item that I thought was really cool. So we've got these Omni Vamp boots that are coming in, right? Gluttonous Greaves, I believe, is the name. So here I want to create an item that could make mid laners happy, specifically AD mid laners, to purchase Grievous Wounds and junglers. And how do you get them involved is you make it at a price point where off of their first clear they can afford boots, and these boots actually do grant some damage, 10 adaptive force. So it is a great assassin boot, one that I think is more important than like the healing that the Gluttonous Greaves gives you. And only mid lane gets the whole variant with Gash 2, so to apply 5-10% plus Grievous Wounds. So they get a total of 30 in that as a quest, but to do so, they lose out for the cheap, like they pay cheaply for it, but they lose out on the Magic Pen, which is so sought after. So I think that it's a really cool idea. It fits the junglers, it fits the mid-roll quest, and it's a cool addition to the game. Now, if we listen to August...
There was an old version of Morellonomicon that was really strong, and it was bought on almost every mage in the game. And it had healing reduction on it, but only under like 40% HP. So it basically said, if you are an AP character, who, by the way, especially back then, a lot of AP characters are burst focused, you have Grievous Wounds against people who are close to death, which, you know, helps you burst them down, basically, and helps you like burst through that last bit of healing and stuff like that. And so to me, it's like, you could say, well, wasn't it a problem that every mage built it? And I would argue, not really, because it basically just said, hey, one of the properties of mages in League of Legends is against low health targets, they're not going to be able to get their Grievous, they're not going to be able to like drain tank or out heal that execution moment. And so I thought that was a reasonable thing. And it's like, and it doesn't and the existence of that Morello item didn't mean that Vlad couldn't function as a character, didn't mean that Warwick couldn't function as a character. Instead, it was just like, hey, are you Vlad? If you get low, these mages will be able to deal with you as a class, but it didn't necessarily mean AD carries could deal with you. It didn't necessarily mean top laners could deal with you. It didn't necessarily mean, bruisers could deal with you, things like that, right?
So here I'm doing it via Gash 8. You could also do minor runes, and you can also have like a new champion identity that plays on this. But I thought it was a really cool item, and if you listen to what he said about the classes, I think that's how I'm going about it. Kempung Chainsword is the top lane. They should have easy access to it because we're talking about fun purchases and a minimum of 2 to properly counter healing now that it's weaker early and you need to stack it. So it needs to be fun purchases. So these items are now allowed to exist again in the ecosystem. Next item is some examples of ones that should not exist. So on the left-hand side, I have Serrated Soul Shredder, which in the Discord community were adamant. Like I had over 400 comments, or I didn't tally them up one by one, but it was an insane amount of people just telling me, no, this item is not allowed to exist. So here I'm asking that, the component, the longsword, could be changed for Gash. but it could be presented this way too. But I'm asking you, N-Step, to just look in. Can you make an item like this? Makes sense. The community came up with like, okay, it deals more damage if that character's been healed recently as an assassin variant. How would this be poached via ADC? But yeah, tackle that. One that I'm adamant shouldn't exist myself is Valdrip Bulwark, because I believe there's a space for Serrated Soul Shredder. But Valdrip Bulwark, to have magic resist is actually... Spirit Visage is meant to be a magic resistance giving item that improves your overall healing, and the same would just make like that arms race counter to counter to counter, and that I agree with, that this item should not exist. Spirit Visage is doing so good, and it exists, and it is doing a great job, and Thorn Mail's like the opposite spectrum. So I'm saying Ultra Bulwark don't exist. Serrated Soul Shredder, there's a possibility for it, but I want NSEP to come up with the idea. Finally, we have an item like I called Condemnation, which could double the duration of Gash Stacks, and it's a support variant. The fact that the unique Inflame damage over time ability of Ashes of the Stars, that's a PoE term, and that's Faded Ashes is what it's called. The fact that it deals damage over time always refreshes the Gash Stacks by itself. So it already has the innate way of extending the duration of Grievous Wounds. And this could be made in a way that it applies to everybody's Grievous Wounds stacks are essentially doubled. And I think it's a cool item for a support to pick up. Some drain tank, so like a brand might, or builds that want to go with damage over time might prefer this item. So I'm thinking of a Swain. It might be too strong, but it's more to present the idea. Again, to a Discord comment who said that since the system is asymptotic by design, every future point is more relevant than the previous one. So how do you convince 5 people to opt into the system? Because it's so much better if the 5th player comes in, if we can hit the 70%. Now, I'm avoiding that by making it uneasy, like very difficult to achieve 70%, just because the coordination burden is impossible by definition. You only get it when you have a 5v1, and when you have a 5v1, you actually don't need the Grievous Wounds because you actually hit the threshold where you have the damage to kill the Drain Tank. But to address that, like of every point being better, which is true and fair, you make it that this is actually the first kind of item sets that's considered like a set piece in like the old Diablo 2 days or whatever, where you all have, the support has double duration, and the mid laner has a we're executing past 50% and just like ramps. And then the top laner has like this siphon, so it's removing and he can survive. So we make this like fantasy-wise like system that you're assembling the 5 pieces of Exodia together as a class. So that was just a way to come to that. Maybe this is a cool way and a cool idea to pursue. So let's listen to NSEP's critic to my previous video, which was all done without this context, and ask some questions.
This entire pitch, though, I don't particularly love because I think it adds so much complexity and coordination burden to this system in a way that I just don't think is actually very valuable or a positive for the game.
All right, so having seen this presentation, she still believes that to be true. I tried to remove the coordination burden, and the complexity is actually I'm trying to solve problems that are in low elo skew. The coordination burden of having actually 5 1v1s instead of a one instance of a 5v1, it fixes that, and fixes the shopkeeper purchases. It weakens it early game. Like, it does quite a bit of things.
I consider the current Grievous Wound system just to be a necessary evil in the game, is how I view it. Not that it is particularly good, but that it functions and it makes the game function the way that we want it to.
All right, so the current 40% is working. It functions. There's no need to overhaul, and this should still be what we aim for.
This is at best a side grade or maybe a slight upgrade, and so it's probably not worth the risk.
And to this I say, if you look at the above, which you're saying that it functions at 40%, there's no need to overhaul it. I'm saying that all you need is a low-risk side grade or slight upgrade to the system. The system isn't broken. There's just some weak points that need to be fixed, and they can be fixed. All you need is a side grade and upgrade, and I would have proposed a different solution if the second point would not have been true. So I honestly think that this can work, and it is an improvement that players would enjoy, but that we'll see in the Discord conversation to come. So to summarize, There's a bunch of information here, but like the dampening existing in the game, the item purchases being more interesting, the no coordination burden to exist more than it is. Like Black Cleaver and Bloodletter's Curse are too complicated for low elo, yet they're allowed to exist. So this kind of system is allowed to exist in League of Legends. It already does. Like there's just so many cool things. Feel free to read the slide and pause if you want to. But I want to get to the conclusion. This video has already been long enough.
I'm waiting for the day when someone proposes a system that's like clearly better than the current Grievous Wounds system.
And to that I say, is this the foundation of this system? It was built around a bunch of Discord comments trying to cater to everybody. And I think it just fits because it's similar to those systems and it just fits nicely. But let me hear your thoughts. Join the conversation and let me know. So shout out to all the people that did help me. So there's a bunch of you guys and there's a bunch more that I missed, but it was a lot of fun. And yeah, have a great day.